Directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet and released in 1997, Alien Resurrection is a movie that is honestly pretty difficult to describe. It is a truly baffling film from top to bottom with regard to all of the decisions that were made that led to its creation. From the get-go, making a direct sequel to Alien 3 was always going to be an uphill battle. Not only was it divisive amongst both audiences and critics, but it killed off both the main character and main antagonist of the series. It was actually Sigourney Weaver herself who advocated for Ripley to be killed off, not wanting the character of Ripley to go on indefinitely fighting aliens. But after seeing Joss Whedon's script and the biggest paycheck she'd ever received for an Alien film, Sigourney Weaver agreed to return. It was producers David Giler and Walter Hill who suggested the idea of cloning Ripley, despite reportedly thinking that making a direct sequel to Alien 3 was a bad idea. Even Jeunet himself expressed surprise at getting the job, because even he thought that making a direct sequel to Alien 3 was a bad idea. So with an actress who wanted to leave, producers who thought this was a bad idea, and a director who thought this was a bad idea, what could possibly go wrong? Well, let's get into it.
You didn't think I was going to bring up Alien Resurrection, but I am.
From its very inception, Alien Resurrection is such a bizarre film from its choice of creatives. Jean-Pierre Jeunet is a French filmmaker who is best known for the award-winning romantic comedy Amélie. But then the script for Alien Resurrection was written by Joss Whedon, best known for these things. So we've got the Amélie guy and the Buffy the Vampire Slayer guy making an Alien movie together. Suffice it to say, this is such a weird pairing for this kind of a movie. And something that I discovered while researching for this video is that there is a great deal of animosity between Jeunet and Whedon over this movie. Whedon has given several statements about how much he hates the movie. When asked about it in a 2005 interview, he said, "It wasn't a question of doing everything differently, although they changed the ending. It was mostly a matter of doing everything wrong. They said the lines, mostly. They said them all wrong. And they cast it wrong. And they designed it wrong. And they scored it wrong. They did everything wrong that they could possibly do. There's actually a fascinating lesson in filmmaking, because everything that they did reflects back to the script, or looks like something from the script, and people assumed that, if I hated it, then they'd changed the script. But it wasn't so much that they'd changed the script, it's that they just executed it in such a ghastly fashion as to render it almost unwatchable." Not wanting to be thrown under the bus without a fight, Jean-Pierre Jeunet responded in kind during an interview in 2022. "I know Joss Whedon said some bad things about me. I don't care. I know if Joss Whedon had made the film himself, it probably would have been a big success. He's very good at making films for American geeks, something for morons, because he's very good at making Marvel films. I hate this kind of movie. It's so silly, so stupid." So yeah. This is what happens when you make a movie with a director and writer who actively despise one another. On top of this, we have a cast that is weirdly stacked. We've got Sigourney Weaver, Joyce Byers, Hellboy, Rima Wormtongue, Tuco Salamanca, and the Prophet of Truth. Everyone is here. This is probably the most star-studded cast out of all the Alien movies, but it's for this movie. I speculate that this was an attempt to draw in a bigger audience by having bigger name actors in the movie, but this decision feels so misguided for this franchise. The characters have never been the biggest draw of the franchise, it's the alien. But this focus on the actors really shows in the movie's marketing, and I think this is very telling. We've also got Pitoff as the second unit director. Now, this name probably doesn't mean anything to most of you, but he would go on to direct a little independent film called. Ironically, this movie also has a weird, goofy basketball scene just like Catwoman. So, from the get go, we have three creatives with wildly different voices, a bunch of actors who feel out of place in this kind of a franchise, and marketing that is focused more on selling the actors than the creature. All of these disparate elements actively work against the film, and unfortunately, it really shows in the final product, especially in the writing.
Wait a second. It has memories. Why does it have memories?
Well, I'm guessing, but inherited memories passed down generationally at a genetic level by the aliens like its strength.
As stated earlier, making a sequel to Alien 3 was always going to be a difficult task because of the way that movie ended. It really seemed like Alien 3 was written to be the conclusion to a trilogy rather than another installment in a long-running franchise. Because the studio insisted that Sigourney Weaver come back as the lead, they forced Joss Whedon into a position where he needed to come up with some way to justify her return. Right off the bat, it is evident that the story has to take so many leaps in logic in order for its premise to work. At the very beginning of the movie, we are told that 200 years have passed since Alien 3, and that this Ripley was cloned from a blood sample that the military got off of Fury 161. So already, this premise raises a ton of questions. 1. Where did they get this blood sample? Ripley's body was completely incinerated in a furnace. My only assumption is that Clemens took a blood sample of Ripley when she was rescued, but this is never outright stated and feels like a stretch already. 2. How does a blood sample remain viable enough for 200 years that DNA can be extracted from it? I can only assume it's some super advanced sci-fi technology that doesn't exist in our world, but I have to say that I hate this kind of storytelling, where you just have to buy that all of this is possible because of super technology. 3rd, why did it take the military 200 years for them to start doing these experiments? We are told that this Ripley is the 8th clone that they have bred, but given that 200 years have passed, that seems like a really low number. Did the military just find Ripley's blood? Did cloning technology just get developed? There are so many questions here that the movie just does not answer. And this also falls into that classic sci-fi problem of technology stagnation, in which the technology of the universe never seems to advance or change despite the huge time jumps. If you told me that this movie took place a year after Alien 3, I'd believe you because nothing really looks or functions that different from how it did in the first 3 Alien films. So all of that to say, the movie does a bad job of justifying its premise and has to take insane leaps in logic in order to work. But it doesn't stop there, because coming off of that already shaky premise, we are told that this clone of Ripley also possesses xenomorph DNA, as well as the memories of the original Ripley. But if being impregnated with a xenomorph combines a person's DNA with a xenomorph's DNA, then that raises all kinds of crazy implications that once again, the movie never addresses. And I can buy that xenomorph DNA is radically different from that of any other organism, but telling me that it is able to carry memories through its genetic code is just too much. And this is more of a personal gripe, but I hate that the way the movie represents Ripley being a xenomorph hybrid is that she has green fingernails. You really couldn't have come up with anything more creative or crazy than that. When I think of a Ripley xenomorph hybrid, I think of something that looks insane and terrifying, but instead we just get Ripley with green fingernails. This movie is somehow too crazy and not crazy enough at the same time. And this gets into another big problem with this movie. One of the strangest aspects of Alien Resurrection is its tone. It's here that you really start to see the conflict between the directing and the writing. Juno has stated that he wanted the movie to be somewhat of a dark comedy, which is already a weird angle to take with an Alien movie. The Alien movies have always had comedic moments, but they are not comedy films. But then, Whedon's script is clearly trying to have his typical brand of quippy humor, but also be serious at certain points. And these two approaches to the film just do not mesh.
Well, that just sort of happened to me. I mean, I didn't even participate in that.
So the result is that you get scenes that are tonally confused, and it's unclear if they are supposed to be funny or serious. This results in a film that gives me such tonal whiplash from scene to scene. It feels like a movie that is at war with itself, unable to decide what kind of film it wants to be. And this is more of a personal preference, but I just hate the look of this movie. Everything looks so ugly and gross with this yellow hue that drenches the whole screen. And Juno is also a big fan of doing these really dramatic close-ups that just don't work for me. We also have some really weird cinematography decisions.
Why don't you take a walk outside?
And if I don't even enjoy looking at a film, let alone watching it, then that's a big problem. As a positive, I will say that I am glad that this movie still uses a lot of practical effects. The ships look really good, and the models for the xenomorphs are still great to see in action. And while I don't like the newborn's design, it's pretty impressive how much articulation and expression they were able to give this animatronic. On top of that, the CGI is pretty good for 1997. It actually looks better than Alien 3 in this regard. But unfortunately, technical aspects of this film are not enough to save it.
He is the one.
And this brings me to one of the worst aspects of the movie.
Who are you expecting? Santa Claus?
Thought you were toast for certain, man.
While Alien Resurrection has many problems, it does stay in line with the other films by changing the setting and characters. Alien followed a crew of civilians, Aliens followed a crew of Marines, Alien 3 followed a crew of prisoners, and now Alien Resurrection follows a crew of smugglers. On paper, this should be a fun premise for an Alien film, but in execution, it's just obnoxious. As much as Joss Whedon tries to shove all the blame for this movie on the director and the actors, frankly, it is the script that is the biggest problem here. Because all of these characters are written to be so unlikable. Everybody in this movie is either hostile, crazy, or both. I get that Ripley being a xenomorph hybrid makes her more volatile and aggressive, but I don't get invested in this version of her because she is so antagonistic to everyone around her and mostly just seems out for her own goals. What defined Ripley as a character in the first three movies was her warmth and her selflessness. We rooted for her because she was empathetic to those around her and worked for the benefit of everyone, not just herself. But with those aspects of her stripped away, she's no longer a character that I am rooting for. She doesn't feel any different from the amoral pirates she's surrounded by. And for the rest of the crew, they are just too selfish and obnoxious to be likable. Alien 3 also had a crew of main characters that were morally dubious, but we sympathized with them because when the chips were down, we saw just how much they cared about one another. Everyone in this main crew is either focused on money, sex, or both. This doesn't make for a likable group of characters, and the fact that nearly every male character is constantly gawking at either Ripley or Call just makes them so off-putting. As a rule of thumb, I try not to let the meta of a film affect my assessment of it, but knowing what we know now about Joss Whedon, it is hard for me to see these scenes and not get a little grossed out. But who knows, if he hadn't written this movie, then maybe we wouldn't have gotten Firefly, so I don't know, you do the calculus on that one. And all of this culminates in what might be the most infamous climax in the Alien franchise.
Finally, I'm a beautiful butterfly!
As insane as the movie is throughout its runtime, the peak of Alien Resurrection's insanity comes in its climax. To its credit, this is the most memorable part of the movie, but not in a good way. At the climax of the film, we find out that just as Ripley was infused with xenomorph DNA, Queen she was carrying was infused with human DNA. Also, I love how you can really hear Brad Dourif's Chucky voice come through in this scene.
That is Ripley's gift to her. A human reproductive system. She is giving birth for you, Ripley, and now she is perfect!
And then, the alien queen gives birth to...
I don't hate it, I just don't like it at all. And it's terrible.
The newborn is just awful. Plain and simple. It's not scary, it's not cool, it's just gross and derpy looking. And the whole angle of the newborn seeing Ripley as its mother is just so uncomfortable, and not in a way that's engaging or entertaining. I just don't like watching these scenes. But then the movie has the gall to try to force an emotional hook at the end where Ripley is crying over this lumpy nightmare that she sees as her son. I'm sorry, but you're not going to make me feel bad for this monstrosity, especially not after it killed my boy Tuco. He deserved better than this. And when it looks at Ripley with puppy dog eyes and whimpers, I just start laughing at how absurd this whole concept is. At least its death is kind of cool, if for no other reason than how insane it is. And then at the very end, we get this weirdly sentimental moment between Ripley and Call that doesn't feel earned and I have no emotional investment in. It's a fittingly bizarre ending to an utterly bizarre film. Overall, Alien Resurrection is a movie that really frustrates me with how bad it is compared to the previous 3 films. We've gone from amazing horror to amazing action to messy but still interesting religious allegory to just B-movie schlock. The writing is confused, the characters are unlikable, and the directing and cinematography is just off-putting. Much like the newborn itself, it is a weird, gross hybrid of so many elements that don't belong together. It is a movie that is certainly memorable for all the wrong reasons. I can understand those who enjoy this as a so bad it's good kind of movie, but for me, this one is just not a fun time. So with all that being said, I'm giving Alien Resurrection 1 out of 5 stars. So far, I would easily call this the worst Alien movie, but bear in mind I have not seen Covenant yet, so stick around as I cover the Alien prequels in the coming weeks. I hope you all have enjoyed this video. Be sure to like and subscribe if you want more of this kind of content, and let me know your own thoughts on Alien Resurrection down below. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.